Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
This morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 12, Creation of the Kumars and Others, text number 28. Vacham duhitaram tandim.
Vacham duhitaram tandim.
Sayambu haratim manaha.
Sayambu haratim manaha.
Kamam chakame kshata.
Kamam chakame kshata.
Sakama iti nashrutam.
Sakama iti nashrutam.
Vacham. Vak. Duhitaram.
Duhitaram.
Unto the daughter.
Tandim.
Born of his body.
Born of his body.
Swayambhu.
Swayambhu.
Brahma. Haratim. Attracting. Manaha. His mind. Akama. Without being sexually inclined. Chakame. Desired. Kshattaha. Ovidura. Sakamaha. Being sexually inclined. Iti. Thus. Naha. We. Shrutam. Have heard. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. O Vidura, we have heard that Brahma had a daughter named Vak, who was born from his body and who attracted his mind towards sex, although she was not sexually inclined towards him. Report. Balavan Indriyagramo Vidangsam Api Karshati, from Srimad Bhagavatam 9:19-17. It is said that the senses are so mad and strong that they can bewilder even the most sensible and learned man. Therefore it is advised that one should not indulge in living alone even with one's mother, sister, or daughter. Vidvangsam api karshati means that even the most learned also becomes victim of the sensuous urge. Maitreya hesitated to state this anomaly on the part of Brahma, who was sexually inclined to his own daughter, but still he mentioned it because sometimes it so happens, and the living example is Brahma himself, although he is the primeval living being and the most learned within the whole universe. If Brahma could be a victim of the sexual urge, then what of others who are prone to so many mundane frailties? The extraordinary immorality on the part of Brahma was heard to have occurred in some particular kalpa, but could not have happened in the kalpa in which Brahma heard directly from the Lord the 4 essential verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, because the Lord benedicted Brahma after giving him lessons on the Bhagavatam that he would never be bewildered in any kalpa whatsoever. This indicates that before the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, he might have fallen a victim to such sensuality. But after hearing Srimad Bhagavatam directly from the Lord, there was no possibility of such failures. One should, however, take serious note of this incident. The human being is a social animal, and his unrestricted mixing with the fair sex leads to downfall. Such social freedom of man and woman, especially among the younger section, is certainly a great stumbling block on the path of spiritual progress. Material bondage is due only to sexual bondage. Therefore, unrestricted association of man and woman is surely a great impediment. Maitreya cited this example on the part of Brahma just to bring our notice to this great danger. Vacham duhitaram tannim sayam bhur haritim manaha akamam chakame kshatta sakama iti nashrutam. O Vidura, we have heard that Brahma had a daughter named Vak, who was born from his body and who attracted his mind towards sex, although she was not sexually inclined towards him. So the daughter Vak is Veda Mata. She is the mother of the Vedas herself. Vak is a Sanskrit word from which we get modern words like voice and vocal and so on. So she is the power of speech, and the original speech, the original sound, the original subject matter is the Vedas. So she appeared in this world as the daughter of Brahma. But Brahma is the master of the Vedas. He is called Adi Kavi, the original poet of Vedic knowledge. So it is remarkable then that he became attracted to Vak in this way. But then again, if we look at this philosophically, we find that this is also mentioned by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, that there are such persons called Vedavadaratis who are attracted to the Vedic sound vibration for sense gratification. Now this is a more philosophical explanation, and that does not lessen in any way. It's not meant to lessen or to minimize in any way the actual fact of this occurrence described here. But the point is that the Vedic sound or the Vedic knowledge can be used to satisfy one's material desires. And there are such persons, Vedavatarata, who think that that is the only purpose. Lord Krishna says that they think beyond sense gratification, there is actually no purpose to this Vedic process. So then this class is divided into two: the Karma Kandiyas and the Jnana Kandiyas. So the Karma Kandiyas are those who directly, that is their direct interest, to use Vedic knowledge for karma, for sense gratification, for advancement in material activities. But the more intelligent of those become frustrated after some time, performing all these complicated rituals. Actually, they can, by these rituals, be promoted to the heavenly world, but as you know, they cannot stay there. They have to come back down. And again, they try to go up. This is the Karma Kanda process. They're thinking that by technical perfection in following the Vedic rituals, that they'll be able to just go up to heaven, come back down, and take birth again on earth in a nice Brahmana family in which the Vedic tradition is being maintained. And then again, use that position as a springboard to go back into heaven, up and down, up and down. And they think this can be maintained just by technical perfection. But that is not the fact. We know from the Krishna book how one king, Maharaj Mriga, he was following this path, but still he got into trouble. That's the nature of this material world. Srila Prabhupada says, even on the royal road, there is always opportunity of accident. Royal road means, just like you, I suppose in Stockholm there are some roads that were built by kings and other European cities. You see, these are very wide roads and they're nicely protected. There were always policemen there because that was the road the king took when he would come out on some official business. Then he would ride in his very opulent chariot with soldiers all around on horses. And so the road was constructed in such a way to be as safe as possible. But still there is always accident happening, even in these circumstances. So Maharaj Mriga, I won't repeat the whole story, you know it, I'm sure, working in BBT. I'm sure you remember what you translate. So, Maharaj Mriga, he had to take birth as a lizard because of some technical error, which wasn't even his fault. But that was the reaction. He was delivered, he was fortunate enough to be delivered by Lord Krishna. But this account illustrates that technical perfection in this material world in anything, even in performance of Vedic rituals, is not possible. So, the original point I was making is that by following the Karmakanda rituals, still there is so much trouble, in spite of the fact that it yields very nice opportunities for sense gratification. Still there is so much trouble, so intelligent people among the karmis, the Vedic karmis, they gradually become frustrated. And then they switch over to the path of jnana, which is a search for knowledge, search for a way to get free of all material entanglement. Ultimately that means to negate material existence and merge into Brahman. But Prabhupada said, you find in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam there, Shukadeva Goswami is presenting the entire, say, gamut or hierarchy of all kinds of material desires. Practically whatever anyone could desire is listed there, and how you can get it by the Vedic process. So the first one is the desire to merge into the Brahman effulgence. That's the first one listed in Canto 2. I think that's chapter 2, verse 1. So that's the first one listed, merging into Brahma Jyoti. And Srila Prabhupada, in his explanation in Los Angeles, in the lecture, said, this is also kama, this is also lusty desire. Anything which is not, any desire which is not directed to satisfy Krishna, the personality of Godhead, anything which is directed to looking out for oneself, in any way, that's called kama, the lusty desire. Even this desire to merge into the Brahma Jyoti. So here Srila Prabhupada writes that there were kalpas in Brahma's life. Now we know by the calculation that Brahma is, as Prabhupada said, about 50 years old. That's half his lifespan. So each day of his life is called a kalpa. And in the beginning of each day, because the night before there was pralaya, there was destruction. So at the beginning of each day, again Brahma creates. So it is explained by the acharyas that on some days, Brahma, just like you wake up in the morning and you find yourself in a certain mood. You see, you find yourself some mornings very glum. You see, very miserable. Other mornings you're raring to go, raring to take on the whole world. Otherwise you're in other mornings you're in a whimsical mood. You just want to laugh and joke and don't care. So apparently from the testimony of the great acharyas, Brahma also, he awakens at the beginning of each kalpa in a mood. Sometimes that mood is the karma mood. And other days it's in the jnana mood. And in this kalpa, the bhakti mood. And therefore, at the beginning of the kalpa, as Srila Prabhupada indicates here, in the purport, he was able to receive this Vedic knowledge directly from the Supreme Lord. That is described in the second canto also. You'll find how the Lord personally appeared to Brahma and gave this benediction that Srila Prabhupada mentions. So by hearing from Krishna himself, then Brahma understood the real purport of the Vedas. And thus, this tendency in the living entity, even when they're so fortunate to come in contact with the Vedic knowledge, this tendency to squeeze something out of the Vedas besides pure devotional service, karma or jnana, that tendency was vanquished in Brahma's heart. So now Prabhupada here in this purport and in other occasions in his conversations, he always repeated this point that Brahma Even in the kalpas, when he is more in a karma kandya mood or jnana kandya mood, still Brahma, he is a most exalted personality. Once someone asked Srila Prabhupada, how is it possible for Brahma to be the founder of our sampradaya in this universe if such things as described in this verse happen? Because we understand Acharya. Acharya means one who teaches by example. So to become attracted in this way to one's own daughter is certainly not the standard example. So how is it possible for Brahma to still be Acharya? And Prabhupada answered that Brahma may be what he is, but he is always Acharya. So the point here is that he is in an exalted position. Before we can entertain some judgment of Brahma's behavior, we should first of all consider Brahma's responsibility given to him by the Lord. And that means whatever particular mood he may be in, Brahma is still the creator. He's in charge by the Lord to create. It is actually the secondary creation. The primary creation is from the Lord himself. But when the creation comes to the point where living entities should be given their bodies, the souls which are within the stem of the lotus flower on which Brahma is sitting, they require at a certain stage to be placed in 8,400,000 forms and positioned all around the universe. And Brahma does that. Nobody else does that. Only Brahma. So this is the first consideration before we try to calculate Brahma's position, his qualification on the basis of this event, which is actually to be taken as an accident. Again, an accident on the royal road. We should consider Brahma's great responsibility, which he carries out perfectly. So, sometimes, yes, even, as Prabhupada says here, even the most sensible and learned man can become bewildered by the pramata indriya, by the mad senses. But the difference between, it is said, there's a Spanish saying, that where the wise man begins is where the fool ends. A wise man, he may in the beginning have some difficulty as described here, but he rectifies that because he's intelligent. But a fool, that's where he ends. He ends up in that difficulty and cannot get out. So, learned and sensible man, Brahma or any exalted person. So he's exalted, so that means he has great advantages, intellectual advantages, advantages of his powers, his talents, his abilities. He is nicely situated. So he utilizes these facilities for advancement. There may be some stumbling block on the way, but he does not misuse his position. Just like there is, just to give an example of a foolish person who happens to be placed in a nice position. Foolish person then misuses that position completely. And that position becomes the cause for that person's utter downfall. So there's a story of a serving lady, serving woman. She was servant to a very wealthy aristocratic lady. And so both of them came down with a fever. the doctor appeared. The doctor was called. So he arrived, and he examined the two of them. And then he commented that, Madame, speaking to the lady of the house, Madame, actually your fever is very slight. According to the Fahrenheit scale, your fever is only 99. The normal temperature, Fahrenheit scale, is 98.6. That's a normal bodily temperature. So your temperature is only 4 points, not points, but 4 decimal points of 1 degree above normal, 99. So this is no problem at all. But your serving maid, now we have some anxiety, because the thermometer says her fever is 105. So this is very serious, and we have to take steps to help her overcome this fever. So when she heard this, the lady of the house, the madame, she became very indignant. What is this? My serving girl has a greater fever than I? 105? But then I should have 110. Because she's thinking that superior position means also in this. One should have a higher fever. One should always be superior to the lower class. So, actually, this is the mistake of foolish living entities who, by good fortune, achieve this human form of life. You know that verse, Svavid Virhosta Krayi Sansutta Parishapshu Nayat Kanto Petu Jatu Nama Gadagraja. So it is saying how these foolish living entities in the human form, they spoil this opportunity by imitating the animals. 4 kinds of animals are mentioned: dog, hog, camel, and ass. And moreover, it is stated, they never glorify, they never follow any leader who takes the holy name of the Lord. Rather, they're inclined, because they're animalistic, to follow leaders who are bigger animals than they. They see animalism as the path of progress. So I'm a dog, so I will respect not the person who chants Hare Krishna, but a bigger dog than me, who barks louder than I can. I can make woof woof, he makes woof woof. So I will respect him. And same with hog, camel, and ass. So each one signifies a certain degraded proclivity. The hog, it eats anything. So those who are experts, they call it gourmet. Expert in eating all, 8,400,000 species. Then he is respected by the hog class. Camel is referring to illicit sex. So those who excel in having illicit sex, they are respected by the camel class. And ass, the hard worker. Those who work harder than the others who are expert in work, then the ass class, they respect them. So this is the point, that the living entity has achieved the human form of life, which is the opportunity to wind up this material existence, to follow the path of the Mahajans, go back home, back to Godhead. But they think like that foolish lady, that we know in this human form of life we should excel the animals. The animals are eating, sleeping, mating, defending. But we have to do that better than they do. So we will use this big human brain, we will invest it in research and development of animalistic activities. How to eat better, sleep better, mate better, defend better. And that will be our civilization. So Srila Prabhupada called this extravagance. This is extravagance. And I'm reminded just by seeing this chandelier, the example Prabhupada gave of this extravagance, one wasting the human form of life. There was a Nawab. Nawab is, or was, in the Muslim period of Indian history, they were very powerful and wealthy rulers who were called Nawab. You've heard Nawab Hussain Shah, no doubt. So the Nawabs, actually it's a word that has come into English. Nabob is the way the English say it. Someone who's a nabob is someone who's fabulously rich and indulges himself in all kinds of whimsical pleasures because he has the money to do it. So Prabhupada told the example of a Nawab who had recently purchased a very, very splendid crystal chandelier. That means, I don't know what this is made of. I would suppose probably plastic. If it's not, then I'm sorry for the insult. But in the old days, the chandeliers were made out of very highly expensive, highly wrought, nicely carved crystal. So the Nawab had installed in the great hall of his mansion, his estate house, a very, very ornate, fabulous crystal chandelier. So the Nawab was upstairs, and downstairs in the hall, the servant was tidying up. So the servant had this big feather brush for brushing the dust, dusting everything. And then the servant brought a ladder, climbed up to dust the chandelier also. So while dusting, then one of the quartz crystals was dislodged from its base, from its support, and fell. It fell down to the marble floor and shattered with a tinkling sound. So you can imagine the servant he went completely white in his face, he was trembling. Oh no, what have I done? Because when one of these diadems is missing, it's obvious to everyone. So he came down from the ladder, practically in tears, began to sweep up the glass. And at that moment, the Nawab came running down from upstairs. What was that sound? What was that sound? So, what could the poor fellow do? He just stood there, his knees were knocking together. My dear sir, I'm very, very sorry. While dusting the chandelier, one of the crystal diadems came out and crashed on the floor. I'm very sorry. And then Nawab stood there and looked at the chandelier and looked at the servant and said, it was such a nice sound. I heard it all the way upstairs. It sounded like the chimes of heaven. Go back up on the ladder. The servant went up on the ladder. Now take another one off and drop it. So he did. He let it fall and crash with a tinkling sound, and the Nawab went, "Achha." One more, please. And so in this way, the Nawab was so fascinated by this sound that the whole chandelier was stripped of all its crystal, and it all ended up as dust, glass dust on the floor. So this way, the Nawab used to live, get his crystal chandelier, and then destroy the whole thing just to hear the nice sound. So this is an example of extravagance. And we should not be extravagant in this human form of life. Although, you see, unfortunately, that is our habit. Because we've achieved this human form of life after so many births in lower species, where the only purpose, the only goal in those species was to eat, sleep, mate, defend. That is our habit. I've been speaking on this point in recent lectures, how Srila Prabhupada used to quote this saying, habit is second nature. It's a very, very good way to understand what it means for the living entity, who after all, his first nature or his original nature, his actual nature is spiritual. And this is a rather profound philosophical problem. Even after years of being in Krishna consciousness, we have trouble to understand this. If I am spiritual, then how am I in Maya? And what does it mean to be in Maya? Why am I so attached to matter if I'm actually spirit? So it's not that the spirit soul has somehow become materialized. It's not that the fundamental energy, the tattva of spirit was transformed into matter, and therefore we're actually like the materialists say, just some automaton, some robot of material energy, unable to change our destiny in any way. No, we are spirit, but the problem is that we have become weak. And how we become weak? By becoming habituated, dependent upon matter. Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita calls this body a yantra, which means a machine. And Srila Prabhupada, in several places, he also translates the word prakriti, which refers to material nature in toto, the total material energy. He's also translated that as machine. And if you look at prakrita, the word prakrita in the Sanskrit dictionary, Monier Williams, you'll find that one of the meanings is manufactured. Something that is manufactured is called prakrita. So, prakriti, a machine, that energy is mechanical, and manufacturing so many bodies, which are also machines, yantra. So, just as we can consider the distance from here, Korsnas Gard, to Stockholm. Now, years ago, I don't know how many years, 50, 100 years, this distance was walked. People would think nothing of walking such a distance. What is it in kilometers about? 30? 36 kilometers. So 36, I mean, I've read books that were written by gentlemen of the last century. And they would go on walks. They would get a stout stick and they would go on walks in the country for 50 kilometers. And that was nothing. That was, they called that, the British gentlemen were very fond of that. They would have great landed estates and they would take walks. And they called it the morning constitution. Walking. Prabhupada did that too. He used to take morning walks. So these gentlemen would take very, very long walks through the forest, sometimes 50 kilometers before breakfast. Come back twirling their mustaches. So, the distance from here to Stockholm, one can certainly walk. But if you propose that nowadays to anyone, especially here, someone has to go, someone is thinking, oh, we should go to Stockholm for some business. Well, let's go, let's put on our hiking boots and walk. What, are you crazy? We can't imagine walking 36 kilometers. Now why not? Is it because our legs have become deformed? Is it because if we walk more than a few hundred meters, our kneecaps will bulge. No. For most of us, our bodies are in quite good order so that one could walk 36 kilometers. But we have become habituated to riding in mechanical conveyances. This is our habit, that's all. It's our habit. And it's very deeply ingrained. So much so that you just can't imagine to walk such a distance. To go from here to Stockholm means you get in a car. That's what it means. There's just no other option. Just like I was reading in a book about the progress of technology. And they were saying how when cars were first invented at the end of the last century, then they were an option. People were walking or using horses and buggies, wagons. So a car was just an option. But the manufacturer of the cars, being capitalists and being very desirous that more and more cars would be bought, so they began to make propaganda, very interesting propaganda campaign in the big cities in America where cars were being manufactured in greater and greater quantity. So actually originally the cars were the oppressed minority. There's a saying, anyone who grew up in America knows this saying, get a horse. That's what people used to shout when they see a car going by, making this put, put, put sound, which people thought was very disturbing. And very often the car would break down. You'd see them by the side of the road and they'd be trying to fix the motor. And people going by would shout, get a horse! So there was this competition between car and horse. So the car manufacturers, they began a propaganda campaign that because of these horses, you're all using horses. So in the great cities like New York, just see how much horse stool is on the road. It's a pollution problem. Every day people have to shovel up, men have to come out, street cleaners, and shovel up so much horse stool. This is very unsanitary. It's not healthy. And they would tell about there are certain diseases which can be spread by horse stool. Very dangerous diseases. One kind of this disease you get, it's called lockjaw. It comes from. So they would, describe all these discrepancies, all these anomalies, and say, but the car, the automobile, is very clean. It doesn't pass through. So actually, this campaign was very effective. People began to switch over, especially as the cars were made better. They didn't break down so much. So more and more people. And so now, automobile is obligatory. How many times do you see, when you're on the road, someone riding a horse? Never. I think it's forbidden now. All these roads out here, they used to be for horse traffic. There were once, unsealed dirt roads. And people would either walk on them or ride horses, or the horses would be pulling wagon. That was the way. People would move around. But now, that same road, one going in front of Korsnas and to the side, you can't go on it with a horse. It's forbidden. So this is technological process of progress, so-called, starts off like this. A new option. But if the option is successful, then very, very quickly it becomes required. It overtakes everything, and you must drive a car. So, but that is only due to habit. This is the point I want to make here. It is only due to habit. And when we take up this habit, when we become habituated, we're speaking of automobiles. So that's a yantra, that's a machine. But let's go right to the source, right to the root. Just as we as human beings have become habituated to riding in automobiles, so we as spirit soul, which is what we actually are, have become habituated to moving around in this material body. And we think it is necessary. We become so addicted, we think it is absolutely required. We must. That is a philosophy. That is actually the Christian doctrine. The Christian doctrine is this, is that the soul must have a material body. And that's why, for those who are actually still believing in the Christian doctrine, they look forward to the resurrection day. This is the glorious day when the trumpets in heaven will sound, and all the graves will open, and the bodies will be made whole in an instant. If the bodies were eaten by worms or dogs or birds, wherever those atoms of the body went, scattered around the world, they will be suddenly brought back in a great whoosh and reformed into the body. The body will rise up from the grave and walk again. This way, everyone will rise up into heaven or go to hell. Good or bad. But the idea here is that the soul cannot function. They believe in the soul, but they believe it cannot function, cannot do anything, unless there's a material body. So this is actually materialism. And they were in the formation of the Christian church. For the first 1,000 years, there were sometimes great debates between those who were spiritualists, who insisted that no, it's the soul that is liberated. Soul becomes free of the body completely and manifests a spiritual form. So they were always defeated. Their position was again and again in the doctrinal controversies in the Christian church, was always defeated, was always rejected. One scholar actually put it in this way, that in these various controversies, the scholar actually used the term, the materialistic position always triumphed. So the Christian doctrine is actually materialistic. So that's what materialism means. The idea that you must have a material body, must have, otherwise you cannot function. So we become habituated in this way. Prabhupada told the story of a fisherman who had come to town to sell his fish. And he came with a big basket. You'll see this still today, a big wicker basket in the marketplace in Bengal. So he'd finished selling his fish, but it was already evening, and he had a long way to go home. So he was walking down the street in the town, and there was one grihastha, very pious grihastha, who whenever there was meals in his house, he would always step outside. Prabhupada said this is the grihastha dharma, the main dharma of the grihastha. They should always step out into the street and call 3 times. If anyone is hungry, please come to my house and take meals. So it just so happened the fisherman was coming by at that time, and so he responded. And the gentleman said, yes, sure, you come in. Please leave that smelly basket outside. So he fed the fisherman very nicely, and then he asked the fisherman, so where do you live? And the fisherman said, well, very far away, in a distant village. So then the man said, oh, you're my guest, I cannot let you go out again in the night. So we have a guest room, so you take rest. The fisherman was very happy. And so he went into the guest room, and the man of the house was sleeping in the room next door. So the man of the house, he could hear through the wall that the fisherman was not sleeping nicely. He kept rolling around and getting up, and walking, pacing back and forth, and would lay down again and get up. And so finally it was in the middle of the night, so the gentleman of the house came to the door, knocked on the door, the fisherman opened. You're not sleeping. No, I'm not sleeping. So what can I do? You're my guest. What can I do to help you sleep? And the fisherman said, well, in my home, because I'm a fisherman, so there's always a fishy smell. So here in your house, because you're a gentleman, there's no fishy smell, and therefore I cannot sleep. So if you please would allow me to bring my fishy smelling basket into my room. Then I'll be able to sleep. So the gentleman said, oh, all right, you're my guest. So then he brought in the basket. And the fisherman, putting the basket next to his head, could sleep very sound. Because that was his habit. He had to have that smell. So we've come to this human form of life, but unfortunately we have this habit to enjoy the fishy smell of sense gratification. And if we don't get it, then we're not satisfied. And something is wrong. And we're agitated and disturbed. So that is the great problem. And for those who are not intelligent, not sensible and learned, then they extravagantly indulge themselves from the advantageous position of this human form of life. They become what Prabhupada calls royal edition of the animals. Royal edition of the animals. They utilize the superior intelligence and superior abilities of this human body in just doing what the dogs, hogs, camels, and asses do. And that is actually a great tragedy for the spirit soul. It is again immersed into the depths of the ocean of birth and death, down, down, down into the lowest forms of life again. And perhaps not again for a whole Chatur Yuga, 4 Yuga cycles. We may not again get another chance at this human form. It's so rare. So, for one who is learned and sensible, like Brahma and those who follow Brahma, then although, yes, it is true that habit is there in all of us, he learns to live in this human form of body. This is intelligence. This is intelligence. To live in this human form of body, and to live in this body means that the senses must be indulged to a certain degree. But to satisfy the senses without getting captured by mind, this requires intelligence. This requires intelligence. And that intelligence is actually handed down in this Brahma Sampradaya, Sri Guru Parampara, as an illustration of what we mean by this kind of intelligence. There's a story of a tribe of monkeys that were, they had a king. King monkey, he was very, very intelligent. So they had been moving through the jungle, foraging. You know, monkeys forage. They look for fruits and nuts and other things that they eat. So they go great distances through the jungle. And after a day of foraging, they had become very thirsty. So there was a lake, a very nice lake. And so the monkeys approached the lake. But the king, their king, he knew something about this lake. So he said, do not drink from this lake. So this was a very severe order for these monkeys who were so thirsty. And they said to the king, but Your Majesty, we're very, very thirsty. He said, yes, I know. I am also just as thirsty as you. And we will drink from this lake. But you must follow my order. Because within this lake is a very, very fearsome monster, kind of Rakshasa. And he waits within the depths of the lake for any creature to try to drink. As soon as the creature touches the water with his lips, that monster reaches up with its huge claws and grabs that creature and pulls him under and devours him in an instant. So that creature right now, he has heard us approaching. He's waiting for us to drink. But we will not drink. We will sit down tightly by the edge of the lake and wait. So they sat and they waited and waited and waited. Finally, after quite some time, the monster came to the surface. And he had a black face with big tusks, like a boar. And he had a blue belly. And he had red, big red claw hands and feet. And he was looking very fiercely at the monkeys, and he said, "Why don't you drink?" And the Monkey King said, "Yes, my dear sir, we will drink, but we know what your plan is. We know why you want us to drink, because you want to eat us." And the Rakshasa, he laughed. And he said, "Yes, that is right. And if you do try to drink, you rascals, I'll eat all of you." So I know you're very thirsty. You're sitting there waiting for a chance to drink. But I warn you, I am always vigilant. No one escapes from this lake. They come to drink. I'll grab, even if you try all at once to drink, I will grab all of you and eat all of you in one go. So the Monkey King, he laughed back and he said, "My dear sir, we were just sitting here waiting for your darshan. And now that we have it, I want to tell you that we will drink from your lake and you will not catch us." So the Rakshasa, he just muttered something, went back beneath the waves and was waiting to see what the monkeys would do. And so the king, he told the monkeys, "Now you see, growing at the edge of the lake are these long straws. So each one of you break one off, the longest ones you can find. Break one off, and we'll drink by straw." So in doing this, the Rakshasa could not catch them. So this is intelligence. This is intelligence. In other words, we must, we have this human body, and the body must eat, and sleep, and mate, and be defended. These functions must go on. So intelligence means to undertake these activities, but without being captured by the Rakshasa of Maya. So the process to do that is the process of devotional service. So, as we've heard, when Brahma was instructed by the Lord personally, in the true meaning of Vacha, Vedic knowledge, the Vedic sound, that this true meaning is devotional service. And then never again was he captured by Maya in the way that is described in today's verse. So we should all take heart from this. We struggle due to our past habits, our second nature, habit. We struggle with these sinful propensities. But this process of Krishna consciousness develops the intelligence in such a way that we can actually satisfy the needs of the body without becoming entangled. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Any questions?
So we speak about Yukta Vairagya, Krishna consciousness. So where does then we have Vairagya, which does not be Vairagya, that's so we take pride in that we're using everything in Krishna's service. Is there any danger in that we can be sidetracked?
Yes, there's always danger, no doubt. But again, we have habit, and we have to break that habit. So that also requires practice. What is the practice? We're actually reading last night in Bhagavad Gita class that one has to follow his nature. The question is whether voluntarily or involuntarily. So the involuntary following of nature is again this habit. What is habit? Habit means mechanical, even unconscious type of activity. Repetitive and unconscious. Like the son of Maharaj Prataprudra, the prince you find in Chaitanya Charitamrita. He had the habit of twisting his neck upward. So these are called quirks. Someone has twists his neck upward, or someone else blinks, or someone else talks in a funny way, or walks in a funny way. It's just a habit, and they do it unconsciously. So how do you break that habit? You must become conscious. You must become conscious. Just like Gopinath Pattanayaka, he was accused by that prince of having done some cheating in transaction of horse sales. So this was brought to the attention of the king. Gopinath had to appear and testify. So in his testimony he said, because one of the accusations was that he had sold horses which were not really top quality, as if they were top quality, but top price. So his reply to that was that my horses are all first class. For example, they do not twist their necks upward. So when he said this, then the prince became suddenly conscious of his own habit, and he was insulted by that remark. So to break a habit, one has to become conscious of the habit. So the danger that you're referring to in Yukta Vairagya is just that we do not come to that consciousness. If we're using, this example of machines is very appropriate. If we're using machinery in Krishna's service, fine, but use it in Krishna consciousness. Because in the material society, what are machines used for? They're used to make life, so to speak, easier. Of course, that's just a euphemism. Life is never easier, but they think it becomes easier. Because they're interested in sense gratification, then the machine gives them more time to gratify the senses. That is the point. But by that sense gratification, then so many inauspicious reactions come upon them. So life doesn't actually get any easier. So for such people, actually it's better that life be harder. It's actually better not to have machines, if that is one's interest. Just like before, in previous centuries, as I was saying, people used to walk, so then they would only move around for very essential and important reasons. Otherwise, you just stay at home. But now people have cars, and what do? You know, let's go to the pizza joint, let's go get a hamburger, you know, let's go here, let's go there, do nonsense. And on the way, you know, they get drunk, they crash up their car, terrible accidents. So it's a horrible society as a result. Actually, it's a good point. I'll expand the answer a little bit. We have a word in English, virtue. Virtue means goodness, but the origin of the word virtue, it can be traced through Latin to Sanskrit. There's a Latin root from which virtue directly comes, vir, which means strong. But even before Latin, there's a Sanskrit root, vir, which means the same thing, strong. So virtue means goodness, but when you trace out the context of this word, virtue, the goodness is spiritual strength. See, in the olden days when people were more intelligent, they knew that we're not the body, we're spirit soul. And they also knew that the soul has its own strengths, its own qualities. Now they listed those qualities differently. They're what are called 7 virtues and 7 sins. So this is from old European philosophy. So the 7 virtues are the qualities of the healthy soul. When a soul is healthy, it is strong. And when it is strong, then its natural good qualities manifest. And these good qualities are opposed by sin, 7 kinds of sin. So anyway, that's the European history behind the word virtue. But this corresponds very well with Vaishnava philosophy. Srila Prabhupada said this, these Vaishnava, when we speak of 26 qualities of the Vaishnava, what are these qualities? They're the qualities of every spirit soul. But the spirit souls have become weak in this material world. Why? Due to becoming habituated to the machinery of this body, to the machinery of material nature. Thus they become lazy and prone to sense gratification, prone to sinful activities. So one must become spiritually strong. That means only one thing, Krishna conscious. So when one is conscious, Krishna conscious, and the natural qualities, the eternal qualities of the soul, again, are manifest, then one can engage the machinery of the material nature in Krishna's service, in remembrance. Chaitasa sarva karmani, where Krishna says, in all activities, chaitasa, we should be conscious of the Lord. So the danger in this yukta vairagya is that we don't do that. We don't become conscious. Now that is a question. It's not a question of because you're using a machine, therefore you can't be Krishna conscious. That's not the point. The point is that you just, it's the choice of the soul. The soul doesn't want to be Krishna conscious. Then the soul will forget Lord Krishna even in the best of circumstances. That means that soul is a fool. This is the point I've been saying in this class. Despite all opportunities, if one is foolish, then one forgets the Lord and utilizes that nice opportunity again for animalistic affairs. So on this point of virtue, just like one of the virtues, one of the traditional virtues is chastity. To be chaste, to only, use the sexual function for, as Prabhupada said, for producing nice Krishna conscious children, otherwise one should not use this function. So someone has observed that because our modern age is so mechanistic, then the effort is to replace the virtues with technology. So the benefit, the social benefit of chastity, obviously, is that there are no unwanted children. So now, without avoiding chastity, because it's a spiritual virtue, requires spiritual strength, and we don't have that anymore, we're all very weak. So by technology they develop contraception. So you get the social benefit of chastity without chastity. You can have illicit sex like anything and still have no children. Or another virtue is fortitude. Fortitude means, or endurance, because one is situated in one's spiritual consciousness, knowing I'm not the body, then the sufferings of the body one can tolerate. As Krishna says, tam tatiksha shabhat. One can tolerate that, knowing I'm not the body. But when one becomes spiritually weak, then the sufferings of the body become intolerable. So by technology, they try to attain the same result, that one is not disturbed by the miseries of the body. How? By drugs, anesthetics, painkillers. So that's a technological substitute for fortitude or tolerance, to swallow a pill. And for chastity also, swallow another kind of pill. So, yeah, this is weakness. This is again becoming habituated to material nature. So we don't want to, yukta vairagya, yes, we want to use everything. All these nice facilities, after all, where do they come from? I mean, we're not religious dualists. We don't believe in a conflict between God and the devil. We don't think that computers and the other devices that we use to print books are creations of the devil. Everything comes from Krishna. The intelligence behind everything is Krishna's. So everything, Krishna Sambandha Vijnana, this phrase. There is a science, Vijnana, to know how everything is connected to Krishna. And that science is the science of Krishna consciousness. This Krishna Sambandha Vijnana is from a prayer to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So this is our Parampara teaching. Use everything in Krishna's service. But use it in consciousness of Krishna. Use it from the position of spiritual strength. Don't allow these conveniences to make us spiritually weak. That's the point. And that's why we make up we develop our spiritual strength by this program, Sadhana Bhakti. It is a simultaneous program. We use these things in Krishna's service, but simultaneously one should rise early, one should attend the morning program, one should chant 16 rounds Hare Krishna very attentively, execute the spiritual duties of devotional service. In this way, be spiritually strong. And then one will not be overwhelmed again by the association of the prakriti, the machine of material nature. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.